Don't worry, it's not contagious. The doctors said that it might be congenital, but none of my family members admit to having it. I think it was generational, because there's a lot of people in my generation who seem to have it. We see connections where none exist. Got that? We see connections where none exist. Let me give you a couple of examples. I had the incredible experience of being in the Great Pyramid in Gaza and also flying over the Nazca lines in Peru. Experiences I'll never forget. Now, scientists and anthropologists can't figure out how they were built and what they were for, because the people who built them did not have the technology, supposedly. Well, for me, the connection is easy. Ancient aliens, what else could it be? Now, to give you something closer to home, almost daily we walk our dogs down at the American River Park, just a couple of blocks from here. One day, we went there, and there were two fawns standing together right in the woods. It was incredible. The very next day we went, and virtually in the very same place, there were two coyote puppies. There were two coyote puppies, and you know what they were, of course? They were the same being as the two fawns the day before. They were shapeshifters. Okay, got it? Making connections where none exist. Now, this is a subtle one, and I want to take some time to go into it. It's about things we hold in our hands. Forever, people have wanted to hold things in their hands, like women held fans and handkerchiefs, usually trying to further conversation. Men held swords and gauntlets, trying not to further conversation. Okay? Now, when I was growing up, we all had something in our hand, and it wasn't a baseball glove. There was no question we were going to smoke when we were growing up in the 60s and 70s. I haven't smoked in 50 years. I almost don't know how to do this anymore. We would take this because it was a style statement. You go like that to pack the tobacco down the cylinder. You open it up. Oh, look at that, it's filtered. If you're cool, you can go like that, and a certain number come out, okay? Have to go like that, and then you would light it. People said I looked really deep when I smoked, and I looked far away. That's what men did. That was our style statement. Now, women had things like this. Compacts. I don't know if women still have them. My wife had to dig deep in one of her drawers to pull this out. And so you'd be out, man would be smoking, and the woman would just kind of pull this out, pretending that you weren't looking at her. And she'd look in there, she'd do a nice profile of 3/4, a little preening. Mm-hmm. You didn't notice it, right? I'm not sure what that was for, ladies. Maybe you can tell me. But those were things that were part of our growing up. Now, to be sure, the tobacco industry and the cosmetics industry had an ulterior motive for doing it. We became addicted to nicotine and vanity. But I think it was about something else. In the transition, there was something called a TV remote control. But today, we have this thing. It is so much cooler. Now, when we were done smoking and the woman was done with her makeup, we had to resort to conversation to get to first, second, or third base, or wherever we wanted to go with the conversation. Okay? Now with this is the perfect device to end all conversations. And that's the warning I want to talk about with you today, because it is so insidious. It's not like a pack of cigarettes. It's not like a fan. This is like part of me now, okay? It's not an extension of my hand. This is an extension of who I am now, my mind. all right? And I remember there used to be an expression, show me a man's friends and I can tell you who he is. Well, there's a modification of that today. Show me a person's apps and I'll tell you who he is, okay? Now I want to explain a little more about what this looks like to me, because I think this thing fills me with a sense of self-importance. Does it for you? I mean, you grew up, I grew up with cigarettes. You actually grew up with this, some of you. And so I want to tell you what it looks like to me. The other night, we had some people over for dinner. And 3 of them were sitting across from me, and they all sat down. They all sat down at the table. And simultaneously, like marionettes that were synchronized together, they all pulled out their cell phones and placed it next to their napkin in the silverware. I had only wished that Fiestaware, which is the table setting that we had a special little plate just for smartphones. It would have been perfect. And I am a bad host. I couldn't help myself. You know what I did? I laughed. Oh, God. My wife was so mad at me afterwards. Actually, she was mad at me then and there, but didn't tell me till afterwards. And one of them got it and defensively said, well, where's yours? And I said, well, it's in the bureau in a drawer on mute with a bunch of Emily Dickinson poetry where it's supposed to be. And so then we went on from there. And you know, to you, it looks just like this, right? Right? Well, it doesn't look like this to me, okay? The email, to me, that looks like a royal stand-up typewriter, upright typewriter, and a telegraph machine. And your FaceTime or the different TV things you watch is like a whole giant Stromberg-Carlson console TV, okay? And Google, it's like having Encyclopedia Britannica, all the volumes pressed out on your table. You see what you're doing here? And what about Facebook? Well, throw a few more photo albums out there, why don't you? Okay, and your music app? Well, that's easy. When I was growing up, we had component sets. We had the amplifier, the speaker, and the turntable. So all that, when you pull out your cell phones, is what I and some other people of my generation see that you're throwing up as a fortress against conversation. It's really a fortress against conversation. Now, if the conversation doesn't go well, you have something that is so important that you don't have to resort to having a conversation with anybody. And I'll never forget, I was traumatized by this. This was the very first time it happened. I hadn't seen somebody in a long time. It was difficult to schedule that person in. We finally did it. We were together at a restaurant having a really interesting conversation. I thought it was an interesting conversation. And then all of a sudden it's like, we interrupt this regularly scheduled program for this late-breaking piece of information that you can't live without. Okay, well, there went that conversation. And so the person, and it was just a cell phone ring. I mean, it wasn't like a big blaring air raid thing going off. And so the person answers the phone. I mean, that shocked me to begin with, that the person would dare do that in front of me. That shows you how far back I go when it comes to manners. You do find that rude, don't you? Okay. Anyway, the person did that, and I could tell what happened. It was like the outside world suddenly flooded in. She wasn't with me anymore at this table in a restaurant. She was in the room that the caller was talking from. I could see it by the distant glaze that occurred in her eyes. She was no longer talking to me, nor was she there. She was talking to this other person. And it was all about suddenly his reality. The worst part of it for me was, now, I look at, to interrupt me if I'm having a conversation with you, better be about one of 3 things. Family emergency, your best client is calling you, or the prospect of sex is imminent. It's got to be one of those 3 things. If it's anything else, believe me, you've wasted my time, okay? And they started chatting. They're just chatting, and suddenly I'm eavesdropping. You know, I'm no longer having a conversation with this person. I'm eavesdropping into something that's interrupted me and pushed me into an unparalleled level of the universe. And so I just want you to know something, that it's really simple to do this. You can turn it off. I know you can do it. Come on. There we go. I know how to do this. And I'm not a Luddite. I believe in these things. When my BlackBerry broke, I got an iPhone 4. When my iPhone 4 broke, I got an iPhone 7. So I believe in this. Okay? But when you turn it off, you don't have to hold it. Instead, you can hold a conversation. Why do they say, hold up a conversation? Okay? And I know what happened in the conversation with my friend who took the other call and chatted. It was too difficult. I made it too difficult to hold up her end of the conversation. It'd be just like if Scott today, when he's doing the table topics, he asks you the question that has no answer. And it was like that. But you can turn it off, you can put it down, and you can do what we used to do in the 60s, resort to conversation. Thank you.
When I first heard your speech, my initial question was, where's he going with this? Because I was trying to connect while you were telling your story. But the more I listened, when you was bringing the audience in and told, it was like one extreme to the other as far as like connections. I said, okay, I know he has a purpose, so let me keep listening. And then we talked about holding things in your hand. And the one that I did learn to think about the cigarette. I did not know you was tapping the cigarette to get the tobacco down. I used to see people do it, I didn't understand why. And the compact for women, sometimes we do it just to check to see who's behind us. Just to let you know.
Thank you.
See, we do that. We do the normal stuff, but if we hold up too long, it's like, okay, who's back there looking at me? But when you brought me into it is when you're talking about turning off the cell phones. And what I liked about it is when you said, if you show someone who you are, traditionally, that's who your friends are, that's who you are. And the twist to it, if you show somebody your apps, that's who you are. And I started thinking, I said, well, what does my app say about me? I said, I need to erase a couple of them. But, you know, this, like you said, the one dealing with the encyclopedia, Google is a very good example of that. I'm using Google Scholar right now to look up court cases for my work. Photo albums versus Facebook, same concept. Another good one you can think about is Google Photos. You can upload everything on there. And when you're sitting down explaining like your dinner table conversation, what I did appreciate about that was recently I just had experience with that when you're having a conversation or soon you invite someone to dinner, all of a sudden, oh, my phone, let's get out of here. And I never thought that that was an escape until I started putting what you were saying about your dinner conversation. And what I did like about this, and one thing that I did right about, one thing Winona did right was that you're no longer present in the presence of someone when you're on your phone with someone. Because your thought is that, okay, let me take this phone call because it's more important. And I like your exceptions. The family emergency, your best client, or sex. I can go for any of those. And you did give listeners an alternative to turning off the cell phone. Just say turn it off toward the end of the day. Because what it results in is a conversation for you and for the people around you. And the one comment I would make to make your speech better is to start off with, it's not so much making connection, just say, how are we connecting these days? Or something along those lines. Because that tripped me up a little bit at the beginning. And one thing that we do in our household, in addition to what you're saying, when we have dinner, I have a bowl in the center of my table. Drop your phones and put them on mute before we eat. And when we start off with that conversation, it normally drives the conversation because you're forced to talk. I look at this, I spent a lot of money in town on this food. Somebody's gonna eat it and have a good time doing it. But other than that, it was a pretty good speech. I appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Thank you.